Use Ash to Life on Rubber Chicken with a podcast in the middle. Phew, that was a close one. If I didn't have my flame-resistant apron on, I would have been killed.
And welcome to Rubber Chicken with a podcast in the middle, the internet's only podcast exclusively devoted to the Monkey Island series of adventure games. I'm Alistair.
I'm Gordon, and we're back.
After a brief hiatus,
After our
for
sabbatical.
reasons we'll go into this episode.
Yeah. Legitimate reasons. It's good to be back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I missed it.
We didn't suddenly lose our enthusiasm for Monkey Island
No. Well,
over the course of 6 weeks, but
we'll go into that.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Right, so this episode is just...
How do we begin?
This episode is, the dust has settled on Return to Monkey Island. Things have returned to normal. We now have 6 Monkey Island games. And it seems like life has returned to the Caribbean.
Yeah, after years and years of anticipation about Ron Gilbert's return to Monkey Island, it happened and life has continued much as it did
Yes.
beforehand.
We got our game. We got our Ron Gilbert and Dave Grossman game. Did we want it at all? That's the question that we're asking, I think.
I believe you said yes back in possibly the first episode of this podcast. You said,
Yeah.
do we really want Ron Gilbert's Monkey Island 3? Yes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, there's a caveat.
and here we are.
Here we are. People's ideas change.
Yes.
I just want to say, I was watching a video earlier today, and it was Patton Oswalt talking to GQ about his favourite and least favourite science fiction films. And he said, I don't like rubbishing movies because someone or a whole group of people broke their back making them, and someone really wanted to make them good. So I just want to get it out there that you and I, in a similar vein, we're not into bashing people for making stuff.
No.
But I think we want to be honest about our feelings.
Our opinions.
Our
Now that the dust has settled, as you put it, on Return to Monkey Island. And I think you can... There's a certain room to bash stuff when it was made in a cynical and exploitative way, and I don't think that this was.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think in the aftermath, our opinion on Return to Monkey Island is perhaps a little bit more complex than when I, for example, said, I like this game, I love parts of it, but it's also a mess. I'm probably more in the stance now of it was a mess, and that's kind of my main...
Yeah, same.
My main opinion on Return to Monkey Island.
So, yeah, I'm probably in the same boat, and it's like I said in the last episode, and I like this because my opinions can change. Do I like it? No, and also yes, but I've kind of come around to no. So how long's it been out for now? 6 weeks?
Yeah, about 6 weeks. I would say it was, the 22nd of September? Something
It feels like a lot longer than
like that, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been that long since we've done a recording.
Yeah.
How many times have you gone back to playing it?
Oh, I tried to replay it once, and I gave up in the middle of part 1 because I got bored and I wasn't enjoying myself.
Yeah, well, I got up to part 3, and I gave up at that point. So we
Because we were going to do a whole thing of going through each part, and I was recording footage for part 1, and I was like, oof, this is rough going.
It's a drag, right?
And we weren't really sort of, and we were talking, and you were sort of, we were exchanging a lot of thoughts, and I had recorded a certain amount of footage, and I thought, I just don't want to play this anymore.
No.
I'll record more later. We'll come back to it. And we didn't.
No,
and for the time being, we're not going to.
No, and I
in
think
the way that we originally planned.
No, we will get around to talking about it more, but I think we're a little exasperated or a little exhausted on it, because you and I have discussed it a lot.
Yeah.
Privately, and it kind of... There are reasons why we don't really like it.
Yeah, it's one of those things, where it's like, do I not like it? I wouldn't go that far. Like, I think it's an interesting game, but it's not. It's like we were saying, is this going to be like Secret Revenge Curse level? No,
it's not.
And were it that level, maybe things would be different, and I think it could have been, and it's not, in my opinion. And fair play to you if you do think it's that good. I think there's some really, really interesting bits and ideas in this game, but not the whole thing.
No. To be honest, I've found it a bit of a drag replaying it. It's a bit of a bore. But I wonder, is this game not for me? Am I at the wrong stage of my life to enjoy it? Is it just how it is? Is it boring? Am I blinded by nostalgia for the early games? I can still go back. I have gone back and played bits of LeChuck's Revenge since Return came out.
Yeah, and as I mentioned to you, I replayed quite a bit of the ending of Curse as well after this came out.
Yeah, and if you said, do you want to play a Monkey Island game now, I would not pick Return. I'd probably pick any of the others over Return. But why is that? I'm going to start with... Let's, the writing. There's too much stuff. And too much stuff to sit through, and it's not punchy enough for me. I often use the example of Fate of Atlantis, where you learn about the ending at the Atlanteans, and you don't actually get presented with much information, just a few ideas, and it's so intriguing because you have to put the ideas all together yourself. In this game, like, we just get bombarded with dialogue, and I think you remember in an episode previously, you and I discussed how they've recorded so many lines of dialogue, right? And then I'm thinking, wow, that was actually not a good thing that there was so much. And this is just in the normal cut. I mean, I've tried to play the director's edition.
Writer's cut.
Yeah, the writer's cut, and like there's even more. And if it was more interesting dialogue, then maybe. But I think it's not quite, like, the humour falls a little flat. It's a lot of stuff to just sit through to get the information you need, and it's a lot of pounding through dialogue trees just to unlock the next bit of puzzle.
Yeah, and we talked about that in our previous episode, and I talked about that in my review that I posted on my blog. There's a lot of dialogue to go through with, as I put it, it's a bit harsh, but as I found them to be uninteresting dialogue with unfunny characters that I think Ron and Dave thought were a lot more interesting than I did. And I note that I was listening on the way home this evening to Cressup's interview with Dave Grossman, and he said one of the first things Dave and I came up with was Guybrush stowing away on LeChuck's ship.
Yeah. Nice
and I
idea,
thought, was this concept, Guybrush on LeChuck's ship with the wacky ghost crew, was this one of these things that was brought up and never let go? Like, the example that I remember you telling me about once upon a time was George Lucas writing his script for Phantom Menace, and he just couldn't let go of the idea of the young boy on Tatooine who's going to grow up to be Darth Vader, even though it's probably not a great way to begin that story, but he just couldn't let it go. And sometimes those ideas that we have at the outset of the creative process are not the best ones. And one of the things that Guybrush can say to Boybrush at the end is, it was about the friends we made along the way. And if you have the right flags hit in that ending, you get a shot of Guybrush in a boat with the chef from the Scumbar and Putra and Murray and Locksmith. I think just having a fun time in the boat. And I think this idea of Guybrush got to know the crew, which is a thing he says in the scrapbook as well, is something that we were meant to take as some important character element in this story.
Yeah.
But from our perspective, it was just a lot of dialogue with new characters that we didn't really care that much about.
Yeah, that's right. It's and Monkey Island's never really worked. It's always kind of been Guybrush really being on his own, right?
We talked about that in Curse as one of the strengths of the atmosphere of Curse. For example.
Yeah, and it's kind of how that is across the whole game, all of the games. I mean, especially the best ones. Yeah, so just a lot of flowery dialogue that doesn't really go anywhere. The characters don't really do that much for me, especially we're introduced to these three, I can't even remember their names. It's Captain Madison and two other people. One of them has a...
Lila and Trent.
Okay, yeah. Those characters go nowhere, right?
No.
I feel like even the character design is a little flat on them, like graphically. They're just like kind of blobby shapes. And you kind of get muddled up about what their motivation is in the game. The idea of Guybrush stowing away on LeChuck's ship, if you told me that happened in LeChuck's Revenge or Curse, around that era of game, I'd think, wow, that's, just imagine it, like, like the creepy sneaking around LeChuck's ship, below decks, but this, like, there's no suspense in this, like, it's all played for laughs, which is okay. These are like funny adventure games, but there is a general lack of atmosphere because of the writing, I think, and the puzzle design. Yeah, and the character design to a certain extent. And there was something I wanted to mention there. Well, two things. One was, LeChuck's crew and the pirate leaders. Too many characters. Yep.
Flair, Gory, Madison, and Lila all feel very interchangeable.
Yeah.
The three of them, especially because Flair kills Trent and Lila betrays Madison.
Yes.
Flair kind of disappears and Lila's the one who chases LeChuck through the door at the end. It feels like there are too many characters here that didn't all need to be the one, or separate characters. You could merge them into one. The other thing I was going to say about stowing away on LeChuck's ship, we already did LeChuck's ship in Secret, and then in Revenge, LeChuck at a fortress. In Curse, LeChuck at a carnival. In Escape, LeChuck wasn't even the main villain. And then you kind of go back in Tales, and it's a little bit repetitive with LeChuck's Mario Brothers ship that we've taken the mick out of in a previous episode. And this kind of thing is... It's been done before.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's my biggest thing with this whole game, is there's too much of this that's been done before, and not only in the ones Ron and Dave worked on, but actually ones they didn't work on. Ron said he replayed Secret, Revenge, and Curse. It probably wouldn't have been a bad idea to replay Escape and Tales as well.
Yeah, you're right.
In Escape, there's Planet Threepwood, for example, which we've said is very similar to the Museum of Pirate Lore in this game. There is also the voting, getting people to vote a certain way on LeChuck's ship, which is very similar to getting the Fraternity of the Manatee Interior to vote a certain way in Tales as well. And I think there's a lot of stuff where, for us, we've seen it before. And this was the thing I said in the episode immediately before Return came out, when I said I was very apprehensive about seeing Melee Island again. The novelty's not there, and I don't think the novelty was there with seeing Melee Island. No. We've already gone back to Melee Island 20 years ago in Escape, and it was novel then. Now it feels almost absurd.
Yeah, there is so much Melee Island in this. Like, this whole thing is
far too much. I think because Melee Island was You know, if you're Marius Winter or something, maybe Melee Island's your favourite part of the game. But for me, I'm a LeChuck's Revenge man. I like the fact that there was so much in that game that was new.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, we see some stuff that's new that's not fleshed out that well. We see a lot of stuff that's familiar from Secret.
Yes. I mean, there's new stuff in all the games. I feel like this is the game with the least new stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Bermuda and Terror Island are not very fleshed out. Scurvy Island, similarly.
No,
we said
not
that
really.
again
Yeah.
in the previous episode.
Yeah, I mean, I said the Terror Island was my favourite bit. I think a lot of people don't like that because it just feels unfinished, which it actually is.
Yeah, even though apparently it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about the letter at the end that apparently Dave wrote, according to that interview.
Yes. Yeah.
And also this ties in with the interviews Cressip did with Ron and Dave. And it's like, do we want to do this only if we've got something new to say, right?
Yeah.
Was there anything new to say in this?
Again, it's interesting to note that in the Cressip interview with Dave, he said that for a long time they didn't have a terribly clear idea of what they actually wanted the story to be about. He said that Ron wanted to make another Monkey Island game, but the impression I got from what he said was, what Monkey Island game? Dunno.
Yeah.
And I wonder to a certain extent if there was a bit of, I want something to happen that's the ending of Monkey Island 2, follows on from that, and that's the idea.
Yeah.
To this point, and then beyond that, not sure.
No, yeah, that's right. He talks about the fact that they're kind of these older, middle-aged guys now, and that they were young guys when they made the original ones, and that was apparently captured that moment in time for them. And then Tails was all about how old they were then. I feel like this is a little retroactive in thinking, and it's a little made up, but it is also true to an extent. Like when we look at, there's that example Red Letter Media give of like Spielberg, for example, making Temple of Doom, and Lucas, a guy literally gets his heart ripped out. That was the phase of life that George Lucas was in, divorce, etc. And then they make King of the Crystal Skull, and Indiana Jones is old, and it's all, there's no one.
It's much softer.
It's a softer, and people do get softer or get more conservative with age or whatever. And like, is that a problem? And does that mean that this game, would it have been better? Is it possible to make something a bit more edgy if you're revisiting a property like this so much later? No?
Yeah,
Maybe.
and I found myself thinking, I found myself thinking a lot, and we've talked about this a lot, about what was the difference between, say, this, or, I don't know, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull isn't a good example because we both like that movie.
Yeah.
But something like that, or one of these many kind of throwback pieces that's been done, and say Twin Peaks 3.
Yeah.
Why was Twin Peaks 3 so good in our eyes? And I guess we didn't have the nostalgia. We didn't watch it when it was new or whatever, or during that long period where it wasn't in the air. But what was the difference? Was it that there was more of a continuity in terms of what the creators were thinking about? Did they have a story that they still wanted to tell? That maybe in the case of Return to Monkey Island, there was not necessarily a story that Ron and Dave wanted to tell, but they went, well, we've got this opportunity to make another Monkey Island. Let's do it.
I think it's apt to draw this parallel with David Lynch, because Ron is definitely, and says that he's very inspired by David Lynch.
Yeah.
And I think Lynch is someone who makes the stuff he wants to, and he is an artistic mind. He paints all day. He made I feel like he made Twin Peaks 3 because he wanted to.
Yeah, and it feels like for him and for Mark Frost as well, I guess there was more story to tell.
Yeah. Not that they even really addressed the story before. There were no new conclusions or anything.
They do and they don't.
Well, they do and they don't.
In that. But I think watching that, if you, it was one of those things where if you were expecting more Kyle MacLachlan as Agent Cooper, of course you would be frustrated, which was kind of the point.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to see what was the logical next step in that storyline, that's what you got.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think with this, yes, Guybrush is a bit older and he and Elaine have a son, and that's all fine. And we've said that the framing device is one of the stronger parts of the game. But in terms of the story of kind of the bulk of the game, going searching for the secret of Monkey Island, was it that interesting? Arguably not. Did we really care? It's a device to express the idea of unfinished business. That's what Ron and Dave have both said, and I can see that.
Sure.
But maybe it's not that compelling, and two, I think this is one of those big things we said a lot. It doesn't feel very piratey.
No, it doesn't have that pirate.
and I think back to Revenge particularly, and of course there's all that carnival-esque stuff in Revenge, but it feels like an extension of the secret world into new horizons.
Yeah.
This, I said to you a number of times, I feel the closest kinship that Return has to any Monkey Island game is with Tales.
Yeah.
Because those both feel like fantasy games where people who didn't really have a clear idea of what they wanted to do.
No.
Sort of went, they're pirates, but let's just chuck whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's I don't have a well formulated thesis about this, but it's one of those things where I just think back and think about how clever even Curse is, and how coherent that all feels, even as weird as it is compared to Tales and Return.
Well, we mentioned earlier the tone of Monkey Island, especially the first two games, being very difficult to capture, and that they pretty much captured it with Curse. But this is completely tonally different. And on your other point, you can be as analytical as you said about whatever you want, but if the material isn't engaging, who cares?
Yeah, and I think that maybe that's the thing, is we just weren't that engaged.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I was just going to say, Dave mentioned, he was talking about interfaces in his interview with Close Up, and he said they looked at modern interfaces, and the game he mentioned was Life is Strange. Which is a game I know you've not played, but I love Life is Strange, especially the first one. And I was thinking back, looking at how seriously they took the writing. They could have done this. It would have been weird, but they could have done this as a really character-driven game.
Yes.
And I sort of said to you before, you have the scene, Guybrush and Elaine are sitting down in the scum bar. There's no immediate conflict, and it's just them sort of talking about where are they at, what do they want, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's focused on them as characters, and you almost do it as an interactive fiction kind of thing.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you've got kind of the classic Monkey Islands where the humor was the thing that kind of drove those character interactions. And this almost feels like it's kind of doesn't know where it's at. You've got a bit of this character drama that kind of goes nowhere with Elaine. You've got funny characters with the LeChuck's crew, but they're a little bit overwritten and it gets a bit tiresome. You get a bit sick of them.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, go away, Iron Rose. I don't like you that much.
Yeah.
Kind of thing, or whoever. And it's sort of, you never kind of get a consistent approach the whole way through.
None of these characters are interesting to talk to. LeChuck is not sinister at all. Or interesting.
Yeah, and LeChuck doesn't have to be sinister.
No.
Like in Curse, he's more funny, he's more ebullient than he is sinister, but
there's no interaction
he just
with him
feels like he's
scene.
not there's not much to him. And maybe that's the point, because at the end, LeChuck is just an animatronic at the carnival.
Yeah, well, the end's something else I want to get into.
Is that his true nature, or is that a metaphor, or both? Yeah, we can talk about that, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you can talk about Day of the Dead because that's so entertaining. Sorry, or Dawn of the Dead. Well, they're both good. That's so entertaining. But it also has all this social commentary of, you can be analytical about it. Look at all the different ideas, right?
Yeah.
You can look at, I'm trying to think of another example. I'm looking on my shelf for a boring film, but I only have good films. I don't know, anything. A trauma film, and that doesn't have any social commentary, and it's not even particularly engaging. You can try to be analytical about it, and you can be as much as you want. Yeah, sure, maybe there is intention in what they're trying to do, but if it's boring, or if it's not engaging enough, it doesn't. There's no need to be... there's no deeper level that you want to dive into. Which brings me to talking about the end.
Yeah.
And I liked the end during our discussion for the last episode. Since we've had the conversation with Ron, where he's basically stated that it is all just a theme park, right? Is that what you got from that?
In a manner of speaking, at least at some point, according to him, which I am not 100% sure about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not 100% sure about
himself, is he kind of full of it?
Well, I don't know, but this is confusing and makes it boring. Because this is not his big David Lynch ending, where it's all intriguing and you have to figure out what's going on yourself. It's just, it's a theme park and life's a theme park. And remember that there's that Bill Tiller thing where he says that would suck if it was true, and it's like, yeah, it would suck, but at the same time, it's interesting to think that it could be both. But if you just kind of state that it is that, then it kind of affects your appreciation of everything.
Yeah, I think definitely you're talking about the conversation with Ron was Cressup's interview with Ron.
Yeah.
Sadly, it wasn't our conversation.
No,
with Ron,
not our
conversation. It was interesting because he said, "Oh yeah, this was the original secret." There is nothing in any of the design documents about the development of Secret which says that at all. I reckon this was a thing at lunch. He said to Dave and Tim, it's just a theme park. And Dave and Tim said, dunno. And he went, yeah, maybe that's a step too far.
Yeah.
And they walked it back.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, he said, Guybrush doesn't know he's in a theme park. The original villain was the guy who ran the theme park, who evolved into LeChuck.
Yeah.
But, LeChuck is, I think, heavily inspired by... He's a kind of mashup of, as far as I know, like Blackbeard as he appears in On Stranger Tides, merged with Captain Hook.
Yeah.
Merged with
Long John Silver.
A bit of... Yeah, and the bad guy from The Princess Bride as well, Prince Humperdinck, who wants to forcibly marry Buttercup.
Yeah.
And this whole thing of it was all a theme park, and Guybrush didn't really know he was in a theme park, and the theme park owner was the bad guy. I don't buy it. I don't buy that was... I think this was something maybe Ron thought about for a bit. Yeah. Somewhere when Mutiny on Monkey Island was evolving into the new Monkey Island, which became Secret of Monkey Island. I don't quite buy that this is... That's it. And like you say, does it suck if he's just a kid in a theme park? I don't know. It's more interesting if it is a bit of both. Like we said, the ending of Monkey Island 2 is so good because it is so bizarre. You know what I was thinking about? Can I do a completely random segue?
Yeah.
But it kind of relates to this. You know how in Blair Witch Project...
Yes.
there's the myth of the Blair Witch
Yep.
and the legend of Rustin Parr.
Yeah.
And Rustin Parr made the kids stand in the corner.
Yeah.
And that's kind of incidental.
Yeah.
But in the film, they go looking for the Blair Witch. And then at the end, he's standing in the corner like what Rustin Parr used to do.
Yeah.
And this ambiguity is like, hang on, are we dealing with the Blair Witch or are we dealing with Rustin Parr? Are they the same person?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do they have something to do with each other? Who knows? The point is that these different ideas have kind of splattered into each other.
Yeah.
I just did a motion with my hands of things splatting into each other. And it's all become too confusing for anyone to untangle.
Yeah.
And that's like the ending of Monkey Island 2. The skeletons in the first aid room.
Yes.
The carnival, Melee Island. All this stuff is kind of, together. And it's perfect because you can't untangle that knot.
Yeah.
And kind of Dominic Armato said they kind of cut through the Gordian knot with the opening of Return, and they did in a manner of speaking. It is a clever opening, but that wasn't the original idea. Ron said that in the interview. That was never the original intention of the ending of Monkey Island 2.
No.
It's all just stuff that's come up after the fact, and I wonder if the whole idea of the ending Guybrush was just in a theme park the whole time. Was this really the secret? Or was this something that Ron considered might have been a secret of Monkey Island at some point, and then he kind of moved on?
Yeah. You never know, and it's the information is what's presented to you within the actual media, not all the interviews and things after the fact, because you can say whatever you want then, but like the thing is the thing.
Yeah.
While we're on that, talking about the fact of the idea of Guybrush searching for the secret of Monkey Island, it feels like this real trap of making sequels to stuff and not wanting to take any risks. And I thought that they might take more risks than they did. Yeah. This kind of reminds me of, how the villain in the 2016 Ghostbusters turns into like the Ghostbusters logo?
This is logo, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, because we've mined everything we can out of this. And it feels like, instead of coming up with some new stuff.
Yeah. It's like them bringing Palpatine back in Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah. Exactly like that.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's like if George Lucas did that.
Yeah.
It's like if George Lucas made, replaced Gozer with the giant Ghostbusters symbol. Or
yeah.
Whatever. Or Zool, or whichever one of it is.
Could George Lucas not win, though? And I guess this is what I was saying before about the past versus now. These people are not the people they were.
No.
And do you want sequels? Do you want people making sequels who were the original authors? Do you want them to be people who have new and interesting ideas? You and I are fans of the Halloween series, for example.
Yeah.
And that's been, had so many people trying to do something with it.
Yeah.
And we often discuss which is the best Halloween sequel. Obviously the first one we think is the best. Also, the Blair Witch Project rules. But like, do you want John Carpenter to drag his heels into making the new Halloween movie, to make Halloween 14? Or would you want someone who's actually interested in doing something original with the property, if it has to happen? Or do you not want anything at all? I think it's the difficult part being a fan, and I find that often a fan online can get a little persecuted for having opinions that go against general fandom. If you don't like something, then you're not a fan, and maybe. But it doesn't mean...
Or if you do like something that the general consensus is bad.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe, crazy idea. Last Jedi, it's actually the best of the sequels.
Yeah.
Controversial opinion.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean it's an amazing movie.
No.
It's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Controversial opinion.
Some interesting ideas.
Rogue One isn't very good.
No.
It's actually quite boring.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. But then, does that make David Lynch and Twin Peaks 3 the exception that proves the rule?
Well, I'm trying to think of another example. And I can't.
Me too.
I think we've discussed this before. You know,
and
remember Romero came back and he did his second trilogy of Dead films, and like they weren't as good as the first three, and they got steadily worse.
I really am not sure. I mean, I think it's one of those things that Doctor Who is going to go through. With modern Doctor Who, people are going to be like, oh great, Russell T Davies has come back, and he's going to make it, and David Tennant, and they're all going to hate it.
Yeah. And
everyone's going to say Russell T Davies ruined Doctor Who again.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm not a fan of Russell T Davies' Doctor Who. No, he's not who he was 15 years ago. They brought back the show.
The thing is what does it take to come back and make something truly exceptional? And it's one of those things where I think if you took the framing device of Return, stripped out the guts of the story, and put a new story in, it'd be a completely different game. But it would be. I think there's the potential there, and I think it does come back to a kind of a Murder Your Darlings situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where they were Ron and Dave, I think, thought LeChuck's crew are really funny. Let's have tons of LeChuck's crew.
Yeah. And they also...
Going back to Melee Island's going to be so nostalgic. Let's have tons of Melee Islands.
There's an element of buying into your own genius, I think. And I think that's true of anyone who has come to a certain point and been told that they're great for a long time. Yeah. And whether that's Spielberg or Metallica or Ron Gilbert, it's... you kind of have to be like, well, I'm me, and I've come up with this idea, and so it must be good. You know what I was thinking was a good example, actually. It'd be like if we found out, or I guess you wouldn't care, but if I found out that Shigeru Miyamoto was making another Mario game, I'd be like, no, don't. I'd be like, he doesn't know how to make games anymore. Don't let him do it. You know, or if you found out he was making the next Zelda, I'd be like, no. You know, it's like, no, he wouldn't. It's not. You're not gonna. And people on the internet would be like, yes, the old guard's returning, and then it'd come out and they'd all hate it. Well, I guess that was kind of us in April, right? That's
because that was the myth that Ron's going to come back and save Monkey Island.
Yeah, we had that faith.
And he kind of knew that he wasn't going to, and it's implicit in the game. Don't be careful what you wish for. It's not the secret's not going to live up to your expectations. The secret, I think, was Ron coming back. What is it? It's nothing too special.
Yeah.
And it's a bit self-defeating in a sense, I think.
I'm not worried about that so much. I don't care. You are right about it being self-defeating, but I don't care about the secret or where it's all going. But I want the adventure to be fun.
I think that's the thing, is the secret, though, is this plot device that drives the story, unmoored from its role or lack thereof in the original game, in which it was unimportant.
Yeah.
But in this game, the secret is really just a metaphor for Monkey Island itself coming back. The Monkey Island magic. What's the secret? Not the secret of Monkey Island TM, but the secret TM of Monkey Island.
You're
What's
actually
the magic recipe of good Monkey Island games. And I think it's like someone said in the aftermath, well, next let's get Ackley and Ahern to make another one. It's like, no, it would be terrible.
No. Yeah, exactly.
And you can't, and you can't just keep expecting that people will come back to their old properties, and make them the way that they did in the old days. At the same time, could this game have been done differently? I think yes. And did Ron and Dave maybe get a little bit too hung up on things that maybe weren't that important?
Yeah.
Yes. As a game that's about Ron and Dave coming back, in a sense, I guess it's kind of... I still think it kind of works, but is the middle of the game, is parts 1, 2, 3, 4 just fluff?
Yeah.
To sort of pad out this story they were telling about how the journey's better than the destination, how things never quite live up to your expectations, how going back, trying to bring back the past is never really worth it.
The Gatsby idea, those are all interesting ideas.
Exactly.
Like, those are interesting ideas dealt with in that novel, right? But I don't think they're dealt with particularly well here. I think they're dealt with
cursorily at the end of the game, but that's about it.
Yeah, but then it's not fleshed out over the course of it, and you don't really kind of sink your teeth
not
into
as
it.
much as it could, not as much and not as consistently as it could be, and that relates to Elaine's writing as well. But before we get into that, I'll let you say what you were going to say.
I've been playing, this is kind of a bit of a long bow to draw, but with my son I've been playing, I told you, the putt-putt games, and this game called Fatty Bear.
Humongous Entertainment.
The Humongous Entertainment game. The Fatty Bear game, they're made for kids aged like 4 to 8. Yeah. And in the game, you are a teddy bear that comes to life at night, and you have to explore a house to make a birthday cake. And I wanted to play it. I wanted to explore all the doors. And even when my son got bored, I was like, yeah, but I want to see what's in there. And that's all it had to be. And this is a kid's game. But it had that, and these are Ron Gilbert games. These really early, humongous titles. And that's what it reminded me of, what those early LucasArts games had, what LeChuck's Revenge had, and what Secret had. I think, and I kind of felt like, oh wow, this is like the spiritual sequel to those games. Because this has that sense of intriguingness, and am I enjoying this more than I enjoyed Return? And yeah, I was, and it was weird. It was weird that it needed that kind of ineffable ingredient. I don't know what it was, but it was interesting. It made me want to keep playing, even though it was so basic in a kid's game.
Yeah, and a contemporary example that I've spoken to you about is very quickly after the end of Return, or not a long time after the release of Return, I should say. Wadget Eye Games, who are the kind of die-hard ongoing publisher of point-and-click adventure games in the indie-ish market, released Excavation of Hobbs Barrow, which I played, and I told you that I quite enjoyed, even though the plot is a complete rip-off of The Wicker Man and various other things. But it wasn't like Return. I was like, oh, I have to get to the end, but I played it over the course of a long weekend or something, and every day it was like, what's going to happen today in Hobbs Barrow kind of thing. I'm intrigued.
You're interested.
And it was something I hadn't seen before. I mean, yes, I had seen that Wicker Man-ish plot before.
Yeah, sure.
But,
and like The Last Door.
It was something different. And it was very similar to The Last Door. But, I kept thinking with Return, and all this stuff we've talked about, all this stuff that we hadn't seen before, like Bermuda or Terror Island or whatever, Scurvy Island, why wasn't this stuff focused on more? And I guess we'll talk at some point, how could you actually improve Return? But it's like, cut Melee, just don't have it. Melee Island, blow it up. It doesn't need to be in the game. Monkey Island doesn't need to be in the game.
No.
LeChuck and Elaine arguably don't need to be in the game. Guybrush maybe doesn't even need to be in the game,
Yeah, almost. It's like we said, if it had just been the intro at the weird, skeezy beachside carnival, would that have actually been better?
Yeah. And the expression that I kept playing over and over in my head in the aftermath was the mystery of Monkey Island. Which I think would be a great name for a sequel, by the way.
Yeah.
What is... I guess it's like a Le Mystère de Monkey Island, the French book, right?
Yeah, the book,
being translated into English. What the mystery of Monkey Island is not necessarily like in the world or the characters or anything like that. It's something more cohesive than all that, more all-encompassing than all of that. And I feel like the mystery of Monkey Island was the thing that I wanted more of in this game. In Revenge, the ending is seeded throughout, but in this it's like, they're in an amusement park at the end. And it kind of just came out of blur. not much foreshadowing or anything. Guybrush was looking for keys, and yeah. And should we talk in terms of the writing, about Elaine a little bit as well?
Yeah.
I think we theorized that maybe Elaine's writing was delayed, and that's sort of been borne out by what Dave said. They actually went back and forth about how she was written a lot. And I think the whole thing of Elaine is kind of the character who speaks to Guybrush a lot about what is the point of pursuing this goal. And that writing, it seems, was not only redrafted multiple times, which is fine, but almost kind of drafted by committee and based on player feedback. And I think that, and again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think Guybrush and Elaine being together was never something that was written by Ron and Dave. Ron always said he would never have them together, but then they did. It feels a bit compromised.
Yeah,
they didn't know
agree.
what to do. These characters in their heads didn't have much of a relationship that was established beyond the end of LeChuck's Revenge. What do we do with them? How do they relate to each other? They had nothing. The two of them had nothing to do with Curse and Escape, and they really had nothing to do with Tails. Apart from tossing some ideas
especially
around.
Dave, I don't think. No.
Yeah, in Dave's case, a bit of project management, as far as we can tell. So there's a gap of something that they're trying to write something that they don't really feel investment in. They should have just not had it. They shouldn't have had Guybrush and Elaine being together, I don't think.
That was one of the best creative decisions. I don't like this movie, but of The Force Awakens, right? Is Han Solo and Princess Leia aren't together, because of course they wouldn't be together, right?
Yeah.
Well, that made their relationship more interesting again, because they were old and they weren't together, and there was still feeling there. But you could have had Elaine in this game, kind of, or hints of Elaine, or
but I think what you said before about the kids at the beach, imagine if it had just been Boy Brush and Chucky.
Yeah.
I mean, people would have been pissed, but
we would have been okay with it.
It would have been novel.
Yeah.
And how good would that have been? The Return to Monkey Island. It's kids playing at what they think Monkey Island is, because the essence or the true history has been lost to time, because of course it has been.
Yeah, and maybe Guybrush. There's a statue of Guybrush, maybe. You know what I mean? He's become mythical being.
Yeah. I was thinking as well about, which I dug up and sent to you, thinking about this whole writing process. The design document for The Pirate Curse of Monkey Island, which was the original design document for Curse that Ackley and Ahern put together, and it's terrible. The story's awful, but they didn't. They changed it.
They changed it and simplified it right down, right?
Yeah, and they cut so much rubbish out of it. It's so bad that I almost can't believe that they got to where they got in the end. But I'm glad they did.
This is the thing with lots of this stuff. People come up there and they splurt out all these ideas. The original Ghostbusters pitch is just terrible. And that turned into this classic comedy because it had other people working on it.
Yeah.
Who had good ideas. And that Curse script, they simplified that down so much to just, as I've said before, it became so simple, and that meant it had so much room to do other stuff.
Yeah. And it's like the mutiny on Monkey Island, I guess, original concept was pretty convoluted and got trimmed down. And it's funny to think of Revenge, which, I think we both think is the best one. The one with the greatest core of genius and inspiration at the heart of it is the one where they didn't actually have a story at all when they started making it.
Yeah.
And
that's the
three
Temple
and
of
four, I
Doom
think, were basically made
again.
up with months ago. Yeah.
Just make it up as you go.
I mean,
you
it's
can't come up with a really
it's like
complicated
Lynch
plot.
writing Inland Empire. He wrote the scenes to be shot each day the night before.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that works for every project, but sometimes you have to get past the idea that you had at the beginning of the project to go, that's no good. Maybe LeChuck's crew aren't that interesting. And I'm a bit fixated on that because when I think of Return, I think of LeChuck's boring crew and how I didn't really care about any of them and wanted them to go away. And Madison and her cohorts as well, and how they're just nothing characters. It'd be like if, I'm trying to think of what a good example would be. I mean, even the pirate leaders in Secret becoming kind of these main characters in Return is faintly ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it would be something like the voodoo priest who appears in that one scene in Revenge becoming a main character.
Yeah, and that's that mining the sequels for stuff, right? Mining the original source material for stuff.
Yeah, or like, I mean, we joked in our Rise of the Pirate God episode, what if it turned out that Stan, the idea of the voodoo lady being important was like the equivalent of Stan being really important. And then in this game it turned out that Stan was almost like God. Like, Stan runs the amusement park in which Guybrush possibly, if you believe his story to his son is true, you don't have to, but possibly has all his adventures.
Yeah, well, a game has to be kind of more planned, right? So you can't whip this all together like you would make the Blair Witch Project day to day.
But Revenge wasn't.
No, true. Maybe this is a bigger production. The thing they talked about, that Dave talked about, is that Lucas, especially early on, Lucasfilm games, early LucasArts, wasn't that interested in making a profit and running the budget, and like that would be such a free way of developing games, and that's why those games are so great. I think. It stood the test of time. Whereas I think they did get a lot of freedom with this game, but times have changed, and you've got to organize a team remotely. They're not all coming in to Skywalker Ranch or whatever. You're recording lines of dialogue. It's a lot of things happening at the same time.
Yeah, and Dave said that it was a 7-month period in which Ron was working out contracts with Devolver and Lucasfilm or / Disney, and Rex Crowell said that he was initially brought on just almost as a test to see if, and it feels like they just didn't have enough time.
No,
because Ron only had that conversation, from what he said, with the guy from Devolver in late 2019.
Yeah.
And think about, like, Revenge again is the exception because that came together so quickly. But going from what the contracts would have been finalised in the middle of the pandemic, maybe in sort of mid 2020, and then the build of the game, the original build of the game, was done by mid 2021. Was that how quickly was the script turned around? Were Ron and Dave kind of bashing out the script in a couple of months so that Ron and Dave Fox could start programming?
Well, it was that quick it was that quick in 1991, right? Or quicker.
With Revenge, yeah.
But
and I guess I've said, Revenge is the example of it being done quickly. So what's the difference? Was it just that inspiration was there?
I assume it's logistical things and possibly age. It's just people in a different phase of life.
And maybe just thinking, I think Ron thought we wanted to see Melee Island and stuff again, and who cares?
Maybe people did.
Maybe they did. I know I said even before now I didn't.
Yeah, well, we said the line that you said was I can't get off Melee Island fast enough or something like that.
Yeah.
Can't wait to get it.
But we ended up back there
multiple times. Yeah. We could talk about this forever.
And we're not intending to be cynical assholes about this game.
No.
I think it was made in good faith, but I think
Yeah, and it's all made
I
well.
just think
I
it's a
like the
bit
graphics, I like the
lacking in
music.
inspiration, you know.
Yeah, it's all
The music, the
programmed really
soundtrack's
well.
probably the best part.
The
of whole
soundtrack's the
thing.
best part. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, it's the heart of the thing, not the facade, right?
It feels like I feel like they weren't quite sure what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've got a game from a couple of guys who were never quite sure of what story they wanted to tell. Maybe in broad strokes, yes. In terms of the nitty-gritty, I feel like maybe they were kind of went with something that they thought worked, and that was what they had, and that was what we got.
Yeah, I guess. And you know, sometimes something is better than nothing, and you just have to put it out there, right?
Yeah, and
as I said at the top of this, people tried to make it good. No, people are never trying to make something bad.
No, and
people don't.
And we said this is never going to be the true sequel to LeChuck's Revenge, the mind-blowing return to things, and it's really made me realise how good Curse is as a sequel to Revenge in a lot of respects, even though the amusement park is dumb, you know, as stupid as the Carnival of the Damned is as a response to the ending of 2, as a game that follows on from those first 2. Curse is really, really good.
Yes.
I knew I wasn't going to get anything like that or like Revenge, but I think I still wanted that deep down.
Yeah. I will still stand and say that Escape is good, mostly, as well.
Yeah, Escape is its own thing. Escape is its separate thing, and we'll talk more about Escape.
We will.
When the time comes. There's lots of Enter the Manatee discussion to be had.
Well, this is really just us talking about why it's taken us so long to get around to doing another episode, because we were putting them out weekly, and then it's been 6 weeks, and it's just because we maybe weren't that inspired.
Yeah, and I think we definitely weren't as inspired as we were expecting to be back in April.
Yeah, and I think you and I are the kind of people who, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Not in cases like this where Ron and Dave are people I respect.
Yeah.
And who I think are talented, you know.
Yeah.
It's not like, I don't know, Alex Kurtzman or something, J.J. Abrams, you know. I don't think these guys are hacks.
No. No. And
so we're sort of thinking, how do we express our feelings of this didn't light our worlds on fire?
Yeah, exactly.
And even though we kind of wanted it to.
I think the game that this should be compared to really is Thimbleweed Park.
Which
and
is
I think
better than Return.
Yeah, and I think in a way, Thimbleweed Park is spiritually Monkey Island 6.
Yes, as well as being Maniac Mansion 3 in some respects.
Yeah, well, it's like the next step. It's if Ron hadn't left LucasArts, you know, that's the natural progression. And
I think from a game development perspective, some stuff interface-wise, for example, in Return, some aspects of that were quite innovative.
Yeah,
Rush's thoughts, for example. Maybe not the red circle if you can't interact with something, but which is a bit oversimplifying, arguably. But yeah,
I found I'm trying to wrap this up, but I found the interface quite limiting exploration-wise, because it's like it felt like it wasn't worth trying anything on anything else or trying anything, because you felt like you'd found it all, and it just as you say, you'd get a red cross that said no.
Yeah, I mostly think of the Guybrush's thoughts bit.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, but
that's about it.
That kind of exists anyway to look at.
Also, one thing, Ron and Dave don't know how to write for Murray because they didn't invent him.
No. Yeah.
Anyway,
why is Murray not funny? Yeah, okay. So that's that, and that's kind of why it's taken us this long. And I guess before I finish up, I want to discuss with you where that leads us next to with the podcast.
Yeah, and I think we're probably just going to go back to talking whenever we feel like it about whatever we feel like. We're not going to focus on Return.
No, I don't think so, because it's not going to be fun, and it'll just kill it for us, I think, if we force ourselves to step through every part of Return like we intended to.
Yeah, we have a long overdue discussion of Act 2 of Escape, of course.
Yeah, and I kind of think let's do that.
There's lots of juicy content in other games for us to get into, and stuff like the Monkey Island movie we've wanted to talk about. For example, the unmade movie.
I want to talk about the fan games.
Chris Yusko and various others,
yeah, stuff like that. So Return is out. We've talked about it, and now we're going to go back to business as usual.
Yeah, but maybe don't expect us to release an episode every week.
We'll just see how we go.
We'll see how we go.
Yeah, we might not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for listening to Rubber Chicken with a Podcast in the Middle, the internet's only podcast dedicated entirely to the Monkey Island series of adventure games. I, as ever, have been Gordon.
And I'm Alistair.
And...
Look behind you! A three-headed monkey!